Welcome to the CEO Story, brought to you by KC Chauhan, founder of Together CFO, where every week we're interviewing the top CEOs in various industries, sharing their journey and extracting the top things that made them successful. Hey, good morning, guys. We've got David Chan here, who is the co-founder and CEO of Riparian. David, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. How are you doing?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about Riparian and what you guys do?
Sure. I usually start off with explaining what Riparian is. Most people ask me, why did you name it Riparian? So
it was on my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So Riparian in nature is the interface between the river and the land. And what it does is help reduce turbidity, meaning it helps clear up the water. It helps control the speed of the river. And ultimately, it just provides for an efficient ecosystem. So similarly for us at Riparian, we try to act as an interface for our clients between either ourselves and technology or them and the government. We also try to clear up murky areas, maybe whether it's regulations by the government or technology is oftentimes a black box. So we try to provide more clarity within the technology space and just control the flow of information with our technology and ultimately just provide for an efficient ecosystem.
That's amazing. So just to touch on a little bit more of what that means. So it's mainly consulting, outsourcing, and software for the life sciences industries, right?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Awesome. Okay, so thanks for sharing that. Why don't we dig into a little bit about you and your background? You've got a very fascinating history. So you graduated at USC, right?
Yes, that's
down
correct.
the road here. That's fantastic. And then went into consulting. So how was life going from a big major school into the consulting world?
Yeah, so at USC, they really push you, especially when you're a business major, to get internships and a lot of thought into how you're going to be interviewing and going after these consulting jobs. And so ultimately, I landed at Arthur Andersen out of school in a division called Strategy, Finance, and Economics. And when I landed in there, they don't really let you choose. You kind of are stuck into one space.
Pretty much, right?
Yeah. So, I was placed in healthcare, and it was sort of interesting. I never thought I would end up in healthcare. Both my parents are in the healthcare industry. My dad's a pharmacist by training, and my mother is a physical therapist. And I was like, I'm not going to do healthcare. But
too much of it at home to be doing it for work as well.
Yeah. So, but I ended up in that space, and I found out it was really complex and interesting. And then Anderson went down, and KPMG bought our division, and so I continued in that space and really started honing more specifically, instead of healthcare in general, into the pharmaceutical space more specifically, and even more specifically in an area now coined as like revenue management, which includes government pricing, government rebates, and commercial rebate adjudication, and really started getting more invested in that area.
So a very heavily regulated industry with a lot of stress, I'm guessing.
Yeah, there were plenty of 20-hour days. I think for the first 4 years, I don't think I ever left before 10, 11 at night. There are many 2, 3 a.m. days. I think they don't really do that as much anymore. But yes, and our space is really interesting. It's really this intersection between regulations, so you kind of have to understand the law relatively well. You have to understand IT and technology. So I ended up kind of getting deep into understanding databases and SQL. And then you also have to understand business and pricing and how what drives prices and discounts and all of that in the industry as well. So
so what I'm hearing is there's a lot of different areas and facets that you kind of have to get to a very good level of understanding, whether it's legal, business law, IT, development, databases, and you kind of have to lead that part of the business.
That's correct. Yeah.
In that high stress government environment as well.
Yeah,
very regulated.
Yeah, it's a pretty high stress environment, and I feel for the pharmaceutical manufacturers. There used to be a lot of litigation in this area, mainly because it wasn't regulated all that well, and so companies were getting sued left and right. And so in the beginning, I did a lot of work in litigation support. Then they started changing the rules, and so there's a lot of pressure on pharmaceutical manufacturers to get this right. If they get it wrong, they can not only get fined with treble damages, but they can also, the executives are certifying to these answers. So now they can go to jail as well and have their personal assets taken. So they have a lot of, there's a lot of interest in making sure they get this right.
Got it. Okay, so then let's fast forward from that point. So 7 years at KPMG, a couple of years at Arthur Andersen, and then you went it alone with some friends and started Marina Consulting. Can you tell us a little bit about high level what Marina Consulting was and what you guys were looking to achieve?
Right. So at Marina Consulting, it was a really simple structure. So at first there was only two of us, myself and this gentleman named Kaveh Nixafat, and then we brought back one of our other former colleagues who went into industry, named Cynthia Huang, who's now also my co-founder at Riparian. And then also brought on another couple people right before we were acquired by this company, IQVIA. And it was a simple structure. There were only 5 partners. We were all experts in it. We had a really simple billing structure. And we didn't really have that much thought into what we were going to turn it into. And surprisingly, we had a decent amount of success in winning a lot of contracts. And so we started getting to the point where we needed to make a decision about, okay, do we hire on a lot of people and build up the infrastructure? When you're starting off like that, it doesn't really make sense to hire on like 1 or 2 employees, because if you hire 1 or 2, now you've built on a lot of operational
overhead, right?
Costs and overhead, and in order to really scale that out, you need to hire at least probably like 5 people or so. So we at the same time we were thinking about this, IQVIA, a publicly traded company, approached us with an offer to acquire us. After some negotiation, I mean, I think it probably took about 9 months. We were acquired at the end of 2012. And then, I worked at IQVIA for the next 3.5 years, almost.
So there's a lot of information to kind of digest there in terms of, one, what were you guys doing differently to win these big contracts and kind of compete with people that had been in the industry a lot longer with more resources, more firepower? What kind of made you different and were able to kind of get some of those solid contracts that allowed you to get acquired?
Yeah, great question. There was, and I had perceived this while I was at the big consulting companies. There was some frustration amongst clients that they were training, and then they were a lot of the younger staff, right? Because as you know, at Big Four, there's a leverage model. So there's a partner, and then there's a director, and then there's like managers, and then seniors and staff. And so they try to do a lot with the staff, and then so how we competed differently was we said, look, we're only 5 experts and we can get things done a lot faster and a lot less expensive than if you went to a big consulting company. And that resonated really well with a lot of companies, and they saw how efficient it was. So, word traveled pretty fast, and we ended up, winning a decent amount of work that way.
Fantastic. So you're kind of using your advantage of being a smaller firm to be quicker and kind of get results cheaper as well. So it's a win-win if someone's willing to take that chance. And the fact that you had that Big Four experience, well, all of you at that point had that Big Four experience. It was pretty much like hiring a Big Four firm, but without the additional cost.
That's right. That's right.
That makes a lot of sense. So then let's talk about an acquisition, because a lot of people here aspire to sell their companies. So what did it feel like? What was kind of going through your mind at that point where you were approached by this huge company, you guys agreed to sell, and then it was a 9-month due diligence process, which seems very long to me.
Yeah, it seems long. It actually went relatively quickly. It didn't feel like a really long process, but there was quite a bit of due diligence. I think people that are thinking about getting acquired, you'll have to realize that you're going to have to make, and it sort of depends on, I guess, your finance team or your co-founding team on how good they are at maintaining different books and all of that. But restructuring your financials to make sure that they're looking at it from a GAAP perspective and all of that. So all of that is relatively complicated, especially if you're a small business. You have to get a good lawyer, obviously. So having good legal counsel is important. So there's a lot of things that I did learn about in that process. One is that they will take your working capital as during the acquisition. So if you're a really small firm like us, all of our money was sitting in the before distribution. So that's a lot of your money is sitting in quote unquote working capital. And so you will lose that during the acquisition, even if they say they're not going to. But that will happen. So make sure that you properly have things accrued and all of that. So on my second company, I'm a lot smarter about.
Yeah, you learned the lessons the hard way by the time.
Yeah.
So let's go into that then. So then you successfully exited. You then did a few years with that company, and then started your own firm once again, Riparian. So tell us a little bit more about kind of the breakaway from the corporate giant at that point, taking your team with you, and what that looked like and felt like at that point in time.
Yeah. So, working at IQVIA was a great experience. I learned a lot, especially about running a division. They highly stress EBITDA over there, so it sort of becomes ingrained in you. At the Big Four, you didn't really. They didn't really stress it. It wasn't like that corporate. So even though you're running your own franchise, if you will, at the Big Four, you're really looking at project gross margin most of the time, right? Whereas at a corporation, they really care about EBITDA. They're really thinking about how efficiently you are running that division.
So you get full control of the P&L rather than just focusing on build hours, pretty much.
Correct. I mean, you don't have full control, but you have a decent.
Yeah, a lot of control. Okay.
You have a decent amount, and so they are. You end up looking at things like capacity models and stuff like how much we're going to make here, and so you have to do a lot more planning, which is why I guess going from consulting. Every year you start out at zero, right? You end up having to resell all new projects, and that makes planning really difficult, right? And so you have to think about, okay, how many more people I'm going to hire, and and so while consulting has a simpler P&L model, it makes it a lot more unpredictable. And so uh, it started building up in me that, okay, you need a more predictable uh, finance model, or like a cash flow model, right? And so and over the years, people have been asking me, hey Dave, can you create some software, and it wasn't really until the advent of AWS that I said, oh yeah, we can actually build software that I think the industry would really like. And so, I actually talked about it while I was at IQVIA, but at the time, they weren't really interested in doing that. Their business model is such that they mainly acquire companies and and capitalize expenses. And so it helps their top line, their revenue, without really cutting into their EBITDA. So I was able to successfully negotiate out of IQVIA and bring my team, and we left on really good terms. I still keep in contact with a lot of the folks over there, and started Riparian with the idea that, okay, we want to make software.
So how did that look day one, starting a company with 14 employees and an idea of developing software?
Yeah, and that
I don't know many people that start day one with 14 people.
Yeah, I know. Hence the complications. So the good news is, so I had approached IQVIA that I was going to leave at least 9 months before I left, in terms of saying, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And I wanted everything to be above board. And so, I wasn't sneaky about anything.
Yeah, you did it the right way.
Yeah. So then I was able to, because of that, and because I was forthcoming and talked about, how we can make it the least, complicated.
Right.
Then, it gave me the flexibility to say, okay, so at this point, I'm going to then leave. I will start up this company, so then I can set up all the HR and everything else. And then, we can have payroll starting when the people come over. It also gave me the ability to figure out how we're going to do the contracts, and work with our clients and all of that, and make sure
Did you have any clients in hand or signed up before you'd actually started the company, or how was the timeline on bringing in revenue versus ramping up on your headcount?
Yeah, so even though I did have clients that were going to come over, as there's always payment terms and everything else.
So, payment terms.
So you need, we figured we needed at least 3 months of of working capital in order to.
And that was still tight, I'm guessing. 3 months isn't a long time at all.
Yeah, 3 months is not a lot of time. And so, yeah, it is extremely challenging. And, it has not been, all roses. We've had some major dips, losses in projects or things we thought were going to come in. Ramped up headcount in certain areas, and and one thing I tell everyone is, my friend told me about this book called The Dip, and I guess most startups end up actually hitting this dip where it doesn't necessarily have to be revenue. It could be people. It could be a number of different things. But you're gonna hit a really tough time, and like right now, a lot of companies are probably hitting this dip right now in this COVID era, right? And it's really how you respond to that, and how you have to have this mentality that, look, I'm not going to fail. I'm not going to let all these people, you know, go down with this ship. We're gonna fix it, and we're gonna make it right. And if you have that willpower and drive to push it through, and you do make it through, then the rest of it is not as scary as it ever was in the past. And so, even if you come across, issues here and there, they will never stress you to that extent anymore.
I would say it'd be multiple dips, not just one dip. I think along the way there's a lot of dips, both up and down. You can't dip without actually getting up to a point of success first. So yeah, I totally resonate with that, and that makes a lot of sense. So how did you get through your dip?
Yeah, so our dip was 2018. Probably lost like $1 million or something, right?
Wow, that's a tough dip to swallow then.
A very, very, very deep hole to dig yourself out of.
Looking back, what mistakes did you make, and how would you, in hindsight, readjust?
Man, I can't get into all the details of it.
You can keep it high level. We don't.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, choosing the right partners in the beginning is ultra important. And making sure you structure the company in the correct way, and making sure that all of your legal documentation, all of that is set up correctly. Making sure that you're hiring the right people, making sure that you really have a handle on everything. And you hear this all the time, like co-founders are a lot of times, and the successful ones have their hands on everything. And there's a reason for that. Like now, myself and Cynthia, who's my other co-founder, we have a grasp on everything. We're head of sales, product, consulting, outsourcing, everything, and operations, you name it. You're kind of
multiple hats, right? That's pretty much.
Yeah. And in the beginning, it is pretty critical. I think if you're not, then things will kind of get out of sync with your vision, and those can be extremely costly. And so, but if you, which is why people have such a tight grip on those things. But I think as you mature into a company and you start building things up, then you're able to delegate out responsibility more. I think if you do it too early, you can end up in a disastrous situation.
Got it. Okay, so keep a good grip on things until you're big enough to kind of then delegate out to leaders within each department independently.
That's right. That's right.
Got it. Yeah, sounds like a tough lesson. We don't have to get too deeper into it, but generally speaking, as you kind of expanded over the last three plus years, how do you identify which areas of the business need more attention or headcount, and how do you adjust that?
Really, really great question. And it's a complicated question. So, I have to look at each thing independently. It's almost like running three different companies. So consulting, I do, capacity model. I kind of figure out how much we're going to potentially be selling into consulting. You kind of estimate your average rates, and then obviously you hire accordingly, right? It's pretty simple. But on the outsource piece, it's a little bit more complicated. You're thinking about ultimately how many clients you're currently going to keep serving, how much you're going to end up adding, how much each individual person is going to be able to service for the additional clients. So and you're trying to do a different cost structure there. So we kind of project that stuff out, and then from a product perspective, it's even more complicated. And I would say it's probably not very complicated, I would say, for most technology startups, because if you get funding for that area, you're probably like, I just need to hire up engineers, designers, UX people, product manager, and so you kind of know all of the areas that you need, and you really just need to hire them up. When you're like us, who we pretty much bootstrap the whole thing, and we don't have outside funding, you end up having to really choose your expertise. So I made a choice early on that, look, for our engineers, we're only going to hire full stack, so we didn't have to worry about whether they're back end or front end capable, that they can do both.
Yeah. Invested in higher quality people so they can wear multiple hats and kind of expand that way, rather than multiple people in their own channels.
That's right. And now that we're getting a bit bigger, our engineering team and our product team in general, now we do have product managers, and it's not just me as a product owner and everything else, and designer. We're kind of expanding out past that now. We're planning for the next phase of actually hiring people who are not necessarily full stack and have expertise in either back end or front end to help really hone their skills on certain areas. So,
got it. Okay, so as we wrap up, there's been a lot of great nuggets of information that you've shared. If I was to summarize them, I would say that at KPMG, you kind of learned a lot of different markets and industries, and kind of how to bring them together, whether it was the IT, the databases, the legal side of it, the regulations, the pharma. There's a lot of kind of learning and being able to lead different teams within different areas. And then to start your own company and to grow it, sell it, and successfully be acquired by a huge industry leader was fantastic. And then during that time where you transitioned out, given enough notice to be able to be fully transparent and clear allowed you to not only prepare and springboard your current business, but to do it in a way that you could bring the talent over that you needed. You could find potential clients to come in along the way, so that when you went fully live, it wasn't as stressful as trying to figure all that out day one. So preparation, I think, so there's some fantastic nuggets of information there. David, thank you so much for sharing with us. How can people reach out to you if they would like to get in contact with you?
Sure. They can reach out to me. My email is dchan@riparian.com. They could also just visit riparian.com. If they mention UKC and the podcast and say that they want to get in touch with me, I'd be happy to do that. They can also find me on LinkedIn. And
we'll leave a link right below here to Riparian so that people can view the website straight away. So David, thank you so much once again for your time. You've been fantastic. We wish you all the success in the future.